I'm Emilie Kuijt. I'm the Data Protection Officer at AppsFlyer, and with me today is from Google, Vlad Popa-Florea. Vlad is a global product lead dealing with apps privacy, and we really want to talk a little bit about how privacy is evolving in the ad tech industry.
I'm happy to be here with our partners at AppsFlyer to discuss a little more about privacy and the changing space in the consent spaces.
So how do you see things evolving at this moment? We really are at a pivotal time, and we'd love to hear what Google's stance is on all of this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I guess from Google's perspective, how we see it is that we're in a very pivotal moment of advertising generally, and these all advances in AI, they are unlocking new opportunities for marketers, but at the same time, regulatory and platform changes are continuing to emerge, and consumers at the same time are asking for more transparency and greater control over how their data is being used. So I think this is only going to continue. If you're a marketer right now, if you want to succeed in this evolving landscape, you really need resilient advertising solutions and services that really can deliver stronger growth, but also can protect and respect user privacy, right? So from a Google perspective, I think we have a lot of changes coming on how the businesses can capture and use data for marketing. And this is really driven by this growing desire for transparency and choice in how user data is being used. There are a multitude of regulations affecting digital advertising globally. Some of them, they're already into effect, but others are in active development or maybe going to effect very soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that really, most of the recent changes have already taken place in the past few years in Europe and in the EU. This regulatory enforcement concept has really come through, but we see the effects globally. And I think that really is the turning point here, where we see that not only we have regulatory changes, we have self-regulatory changes happening, and it really has caused a reduction in the use of data and data for audiences. And that is something that has caused the ad tech industry to really have to adapt. And I think it's very interesting to talk today also with you about, the different approaches that we have seen from within the industry, where we see there's a focus, of course, on privacy enhancing technologies, on pets, on data clean rooms, using contextual only data minimization efforts. And I think that each of these approaches has its own value and has its own worth, but all of them require very careful privacy oversight still, where we look at consent management, we look at opt-out situations where we have regulatory scrutiny, and it's a trend that's not going away, and it's much more expanding the way we see it. And we need to look at it as an industry and see how can we respect consumer wishes, how can the active businesses in this industry work with privacy and create that space for the consumer. So I would love to hear also from you what your thoughts are on user expectations and how that impacts the day-to-day of the advertisers in the industry.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad you positioned it in that way of like, it's up to the industry to respect consumer wishes. I see it, and I think my team sees it in a very similar way. And I'm also happy that you brought up a lot of these privacy enhancing technologies, and we're going to dive into that later as well. But in terms of how I think user expectations impact how marketers do their job, I think I mentioned some of these regulations are already live, right? I think everybody knows about GDPR. Everybody knows about a privacy directive, but others are also in active development or maybe going into effect very soon. I think in addition to these regulatory changes, you have the changes on the platform or technology side, where, for example, third-party cookies, they've been deteriorating as browsers have been phasing them out or consumers choosing not to allow them, right? All these changes together, they're not new news for everybody. Everybody saw they make. But I do think that 2024 specifically is the inflection point for marketers, where your digital marketing and measurement will rapidly lose effectiveness if you don't take action, right? And I think that's what we are here to help everyone with, both you and me in this conversation right now. I think because of this evolution, at Google, we delivered a lot of multiple product upgrades throughout this year, but also last year. with some of them requiring immediate advertiser action. I guess these product upgrades essentially aim to make it easier for marketers to obtain and signal user consent wherever that user consent is required, and what use Google's advertising platforms in line with evolving, regulatory guidance and to meet user expectations. So I guess that's how I see it, but would love to have a perspective from AppsFlyer as well.
I definitely think that you're very right when you're talking about 2024 being pivotal here, because of course we've had the ecosystem being impacted by iOS 14, or there's been a need for consent mechanisms through regulations like the GDPR, like you mentioned, or e-privacy. And I think that will have been a first introduction for many advertisers to CMPs, to consent management platforms, and these tools that really help manage that user consent for data collection are already out there. And we've been working with CMPs for many years already to enable our customers to easily adapt to these changes and to these alternate mechanisms and systems of working. But we do need to see how business continue to change, with end users requesting more and more control over what data are they sharing, where's their data flowing, and advertisers need to ensure that they are implementing these safeguards for that data sharing, and also especially operating with transparency towards their end users to gain that level of trust from their end users, to show them they are being compliant with the wishes and respecting the wishes of their end users. So these evolving requirements impose a more privacy-minded approach, and I do think that is, where we are headed as an industry, and it's pushing advertisers to evaluate this need for data use. What can we achieve without all of this data use? This is something that we've seen in the industry as a whole, the advertising industry as a whole, that there has been a myriad of studies. We've seen that there is a paradox between what the consumer wants on the one hand, privacy protection. We don't want too much data collection. We want to have control over where the data is going. And at the same time, a lot of consumers do express some sort of preference for personalized ads, relevant, what is seen in the screen. What do I see when I scroll through my feed? Is it something that is related to me? So this requires a level of data collection. We do, on the one hand, see that paradox between privacy versus relevance. And that shows that users value privacy and value personalization. And it's this balancing act for advertisers in the industry. And what I find fascinating at this point is, how do we adopt innovative solutions to ensure that we respect user privacy, to ensure that we enable the compliance with all of these data protection guidelines and regulations, while at the same time delivering these tailored experiences?
Emilie, I want to say I love your metaphors of calling it a balancing act, because I think it is a balancing act ultimately. And I think we're firm believers that you can still achieve a growth marketing, a good portion of growth marketing, while also respecting user choices and user privacy. So we're firm believers in that. In terms of specifically what are policy requirements, let's take a step back and understand what are these consent requirements, and I guess what does it mean for an advertiser in practice, right? So first of all, everybody, any marketer who's using Google's advertising solutions in the European Economic Area must continue to obtain and respect the end user consent, right? So this is not new. We have our existing EU user consent policy that's been in place since 2018, and really reflects the industry-wide interpretation of regulatory standards, for example, set by the Privacy Directive or in GDPR. So what this changing ecosystem essentially means for you as an advertiser is that you'll need to take two main steps. First, I think we will continue to require you to collect end user consent, as I mentioned. You can either do this via one or two ways. So a lot of advertisers choose to do it via an in-house solution, so they prompt their own consent banner, or they choose to use a consent management platform, also known as a CMP. And we'll talk more about CMPs actually in a bit. And the second step is you will need to communicate these user consent choices to Google for each of our use cases to confirm that the user consent has indeed been collected, right? Or not in this case. And I think what's important to note here is that starting early 2024, hopefully everybody is already aware of that, but we have been bolstering the enforcement of our existing user consent policy, and you require advertisers to complete both of these actions in order for personalized advertising and audience features with Google to be enabled for EEA users. And I think we're gonna continue to audit, enforce, and ensure compliance with these requirements. And for these exact reasons, I think we require you to follow these necessary steps, right? So one is collect user consent, and the second is communicate that consent back to Google via the appropriate mechanism. One of the appropriate mechanisms being obviously our friends here at AppsFlyer. We worked hard over the last few months and years to make this as smooth as possible for everybody. One tool that I do want to call out is Google Consent Mode, which is a tool that connects consent values with Google's products for our advertisers that are using Google Analytics for conversions. It was originally designed for the web. We've expanded since its capabilities, and it's available for mobile apps.
The SDK itself. Now, that's obviously something that is a key issue that we see in a lot of inquiries from advertisers, and it's becoming more topical. Is how is it done? And like you said, it's not the place to get too technical, but the design of AppsFlyer's SDK is tuned into the collection and relay of consent information, really streamlining the duties of the advertisers to comply with the regulatory mandates or the self-regulatory mandates. And it's the support system that we try to enable compliance for the advertisers for the smooth transition of these user consent details, whilst also keeping in mind, the other regulatory effects, and also what's important for all of our various advertisers in the ecosystem and what might be relevant to each and every one. And in that sense, the SDK extends beyond the mere assisting of passing on a consent. Rather, we partner with a multitude of CMPs. Everything can be built in, integrations can be built in. It makes it easier for advertisers to work with their compliance. There's also the opportunity for the collection of data and the smooth facilitation of the TCF data, of transparency and consent framework data, which of course is an alternative to consent mode. There's also the opportunity, of course, still for manual collection by advertisers. So it's definitely a pick and choose for advertisers of how they would like to use the SDK to enable their own compliance, and we really want to ensure that we're able to cater to the needs of all the various advertisers out there. I wanted to ask you, Vlad, what is the type of impact to Google Ads that advertisers may expect when they implement these changes in their system? Are there any differences between solutions available that you can address?
I think it's a very, very pertinent question. And it's a very timely question. So we've been getting this a lot. So I think it's good to address it head on as well. I would say let's start by dividing this question into two types of expected impact. One is on the optimization front, and one is on the reporting front. I think on the optimization front, there really is no major impact expected on your app campaign performance, as conversion modeling will really fill in the blanks and measurement at times when it's not possible to observe really that path between ad interaction and conversion, right? So whenever the user declines consent. And conversion modeling uses Google AI to really analyze observable data, historical trends, and really quantifies the relationship between consented and unconsented users. Needless to say, the higher your app's consent rate, the less Google will have to model to really fill in the gaps left. So that's also self-understandable. I think these modeled conversions, if you have been doing consent mode for a while, or any type of consent prompt for now, the model conversions will be integrated directly in your Google Ads campaign reports. They will have the same granularity as observed conversions, and then this data makes its way, into the bidding tools, and you can be confident that your campaigns will be optimized based on a full view of your results. I think now let's move on to maybe a rather more newer or interesting part is on the reporting or attribution side, right? I think you should expect a few changes when you start sending consent signals via AppsFlyer to Google, right? So I think using the SDK and whatever tools Emilie mentioned before. I think the first thing is your attribution report in AppsFlyer will not contain unconsented Google conversions across iOS and Android. So overall, you should expect that your Google performance overall may change. For now, these unconsented conversions that otherwise would have been attributed to Google, may instead be attributed to other sources of traffic, such as other ad networks or maybe direct sources of traffic. And I think secondly, you may notice a shift in the conversion data presented in your Google Ads reporting if you compare it to your AppsFlyer reports, mainly due to the fact that today model conversions are really not included in our AppsFlyer attribution reports, but they are included in Google Ads reports for now. So I think those are the two main expected changes that advertisers would be able to see.
Yeah, thanks for raising those points, because it is crucial for the understanding that consent requirements do indeed affect each advertiser differently. If we look and we talk about working with consent management platforms, what would you advise an advertiser to do? How can an advertiser best work with a CMP?
Yeah, I think a lot of advertisers have been asking us, like, look, why should I be working with the CMP to begin with? I think my recommendation of using a consent management platform comes for mainly two reasons. One is really these platforms and these partners have previous experience in adapting to local regulations. So they've done this before time and again. They really know how to do it. And I think secondly, these certified CMP partners really have automated their integrations with Google and ad tech partners like AppsFlyer in order to make it easier for you to pass back consent signals. So, for example, with AppsFlyer's built-in CMP integration, the SDK can facilitate a smooth collection and sharing of data to Google Ads. And I think you're going to talk a lot about it in more details, Emilie, but I think these are the two main reasons why we would rather recommend an advertiser work with consent management platforms. If you want to find out more about our Google CMP partner program, you can go on cmppartnerprogram.withgoogle.com. But would love to hear more from AppsFlyer and how you guys see working with these together as well.
Yeah, thanks. We like you get this question a lot, and it's definitely something that we see coming more and more. And I'm not here to give anyone legal advice, of course, but my best advice would be look at what works for you. Now, some companies may decide to build their own consent management platform. If you have that capacity and if that works for you, that sounds fantastic. Others, like you also said, Vlad, turn to some established vendors in the space. How can I implement best practices out there? And from AppsFlyer's perspective, the SDK and the other services they work with built-in CMP integrations. We facilitate TCF data collection and also, of course, continue to actively work in collaborating with Google or other publishers in the space to craft and to deliver solutions. But as it's been a core mission of AppsFlyer to remain impartial and unbiased among advertisers, it's also important for us to be able to work with those CMPs out there that whatever advertiser we may work with may choose in order to be able to provide them the ability to be compliant in the manner that they choose to be compliant. So advertisers can prioritize the user experience by designing the consent requests that are relevant to their business and easy for their users to understand. So consent or withholding of that consent in itself can provide relevant information and relevant data to advertisers. And these insights in themselves can also provide strategies on how to reach out, how to meet user expectations. And advertisers can do this whilst maintaining user privacy. And so in that sense, whatever way advertisers aim to go for the implementation of CMPs, the results in themselves in a privacy preserving manner will be able to provide information. And It's also important to say that, maybe stating the obvious, but advertisers must remain up to date on regulatory changes in their field. So if you're working in the financial field, in the food industry, whatever it is, whatever might be relevant to your industry, it's important to review and update practices to stay compliant. So it's important for advertisers, when considering their CMPs, to choose and consider, what region am I operating in? Where am I rolling out? And what are the specific regulations that apply to me? And then evaluate what partners are the best fit and provide a solution to those concerns and how they can collect consent from their end users. I'm going to ask you for consent here, Vlad. If you're consenting to this, would we shift the discussion a little bit from consent management to measurement and signal loss? What Google has going on to support advertisers with regards to these trends.
Yeah, and by the way, consent granted, so we'll have to continue with this conversation. I would say, we're excited about this space, honestly. I think this is one where I'm personally pretty involved in as well, but I've been working closely with AppsFlyer at this. Generally, we're striving to come up with solutions that will address exactly this concern. So really, how can advertisers see the full view? So maybe to take a step back, I think the number one concern that a lot of advertisers is this really lack of viewability, lack of visibility, lack of attribution, right, into Google attributed conversions. So I think the solution will hopefully exactly address that. How can I see the full view of my Google attributed conversions, and how can I make the right marketing decisions, right? Namely, we have been working on developing a feature that will allow AppsFlyer to include the entirety of Google attributed conversions, both consented and unconsented, via a privacy forward mechanism, right? With hopefully minimal implementation resources required from advertisers. I don't have a lot more details to share right now, hopefully later this year, but we're excited to launch this in the coming months and really bring more visibility into the attribution space. Again, I think you mentioned that at the earlier stage, it's all a balancing act, but I think we can really provide this visibility while maintaining user privacy as well. And this is exactly what this collaboration with AppsFlyer is all about.
It's true that AppsFlyer has been working for many years on privacy forward solutions. And it's really one of the core pillars where we are committed to user privacy by design approaches in all of the solutions and the products that are built here. And really, all of the new developments are geared towards privacy-based measurement. And to AppsFlyer, it's not so much about signal loss as it is about taking a new look at how the industry processes data and creating strong signals and better ways of support for the advertisers to evolve and to be able to have this strategic level of insights and of data with privacy at the core. And where we see the traditional signals on decline, we want to be, and we as a company, the company's proud to be at the forefront of developing solutions that help advertisers overcome the challenges working with enhanced signals that preserve user privacy and respect user privacy. And those are the solutions where privacy by design and privacy by default really are the key components in development. And we, of course, also aim to continue to educate about the latest privacy practices and inform advertisers about the management of data. And advertisers in turn, I mean, you at the end of the day also need to enhance that stance and ensure that there is a mechanism in place for users to ask questions about privacy and create that transparency and trustworthiness in order to create that compliance, but also not just create compliance, but really go above and beyond and say privacy is a pillar and this is where we want to be moving towards. So that's definitely something that has been at the core of where we are with the company for many years, privacy by design and privacy by default.
What are some other ways AppsFlyer is helping advertisers adapt to this changing landscape that we think will impact the way they do, the way they have been doing traditional advertising so far?
The company is working continuously on providing customers with these tailored solutions, and we really aim to meet customers where they are. So are you a kids-facing app? That has different needs than a rideshare app. So each customer has its own needs, and we aim to provide privacy-oriented solutions for all. Now, what does that mean? That means that we provide, of course, general information. We've got a privacy hub. That's where all of our compliance matters are addressed. But of course, we also have product development, as any company has. We really look towards how can we provide tailored solutions for everyone out there. That means there's a lot of work done on AI-driven solutions. That's the ad creative optimization. There's, of course, the single source of truth, which really leverages machine learning, statistics, insights, enhancing the understanding of campaign LTV performance, which is also another great new development. And then there's, of course, the data collaboration platform, where really the utmost efforts are being made to create a privacy-first, trusted environment where the data clean room, the AppsFlyer data clean room, has been leveraged. And this, of course, comes in addition to what you just mentioned, the product teams working with the Android team at Google, like you mentioned earlier, with solutions for Privacy Sandbox. So that's definitely something to stay on the lookout for coming in the next few months. Before we really close down, is there anything you want to add, Vlad, at this point? Is there anything, a last thought before we sign off and say goodbye?
Yeah, I would say, let's see, first of all, thank you so much to AppsFlyer for having me in this space. And I think it cannot come highly enough to have this conversation. So I think we touched upon all the main, I would say, to-do lists and advertiser actions that need to happen. I would say if people are in doubt, visit either our own privacy hub on Google or, as you mentioned, Emilie, on AppsFlyer's privacy hub. But keep in mind just user consent in this way prompts you for two main actions. Make sure you collect user consent in the European Economic Area if you're advertising there, and also two is make sure you're sending us that consent signal to Google as well via whatever consent mechanism as well. So I'll say that will be my to-do items to take away this conversation as well.
Key takeaways for sure. Collect user consent. Definitely something that we want people to take home after this conversation.